welcome my dear students to another literary theory class. We were discussing liberal humanism. So let's probe into more aspects of liberal humanism.
Liberal humanism. Liberal humanism is a literary theory that was popular at the end of the 1800s and beginning 1900s. So liberal humanism was popular towards the end of 1800s and beginning of 1900s. The next point that you have to know about liberal humanism is that it understands literature or poetry to be timeless. Now, what is timeless? Timeless means not affected by the passage of time or changes in fashion. It is lasting. It's like a classic work. Well, what is a classic work? It crosses all the ages and it appeals to all the age groups. It lasts for a long time. So that is a classic. So like a classic, it does not change in fashion. It is timeless. So literature and poetry is timeless according to liberal humanism. Then, it must reveal a constant or universal truth about humanity. So, liberal humanism reveals a constant truth about humanity or human beings. What is constant? Constant? It does not change, it remains, that is constant. Universal appeals to the whole world, universal truth about humanity. Then, it contains meaning without regard to other works. That is, it concentrates on the text and not the context. That is, text means the written words. Context is the surroundings of a text. So here in liberal humanism, it contains meaning without regarding to other works or context. Text is the written words and context, as I told you, surroundings of a text, which means that it is something created within the text. For example, if it was literature written during a world war, the context may affect you. It describes the situation of the author's life in which the text was written, the author's emotional state, his mood, his life, or maybe if there's a situation like emergency, it may affect his life. Works of Anne Frank, for example, it always denoted Hitler, Germany, the supreme power of Germans, Nazis, Jews, all those factors affected the work. But here in liberal humanism, only the text is prime, which means that text is important. It is self-contained. Liberal humanists analyze the text of a poem with no predetermined ideas or bias. Bias is partiality. Not having partiality towards any isms or any theories. Predetermined ideas, pre-established notions, something which is fixed set of rules. So liberal humanism doesn't agree with that. There's no predetermined ideas as such. Therefore, a Marxist or feminist could not, in fairness, call themselves a liberal humanist. For that, you should know what Marxism and feminism is. Marxist ideas support political and economic theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and it was later developed by the followers to form the basis of communism. It's named after Karl Marx. Mainly, Marxism argues for worker revolution. It stands with the workers. And they advocate that society should not have any class distinction, should not have any class division, stands with the workers and opposes capitalism. Capitalism നമുക്കറിയാം മുതലാളിത്ത വ്യവസ്ഥിതിയാണ്. So, Marxism supports the worker revolution. What is feminism? Feminism is belief in social, economic, political equality of the sexes. Though it originated in the West, it manifested worldwide and it upholds women's rights and interests. It proposes equality and stands for non-discrimination. Beliefs of liberal humanism. General, it supports absolute truth. The world can be controlled and ordered. It can be dominated. That was one of the belief. We can picture and represent the world. That is, world can be represented. Belief in linear progress. Now, what is linear progress? Linear is a straight line, so which means that it is a straight progress from one stage to another. It has a starting and ending point. It begins from past to present and then from present to future. So, that is a linear progress. Universal, coming to universal. Universality means text must be studied in isolation. As I told you before, text is important, not the context or personal ideologies, especially of the author. So, text must be considered in isolation. That is, text is self-contained. It has many things within itself. You don't have to compare it with other factors around, extrinsic factors, the context or personal ideologies. Human nature is unchanging, which means that human nature is constant. As I told you, it has some connection with timeless, being timeless. So, human nature is always the same. If at all there is any changes, it means it's like an old wine in a new bottle. It just changes the form. Then, people's individuality or personality is transcendent. What is transcendent? Transcendent is beyond normal range of physical experience. It is something beyond. It transcends. It is unexpected. Individuality and personality is unexpected. Many things can happen. It goes beyond the normal range of human capacities, normal capabilities. Again, the purpose of liberal humanism is humanist enhancement of life. Liberal humanist subject. The notion or the idea that we have a more or less stable self-concept, stable, firm self-concept, a concept about yourself, that is self-concept. The idea that we have a more or less stable and coherent self, often referred to as the Descartesian or Cartesian self, after the 17th century French philosopher Descartes. He is René Descartes. That's how you pronounce it. It is Cartesian, not Cartesian, it is Cartesian. This Cartesian liberated an autonomous subject is in charge of him or herself and engages, or at least is capable of engaging, in rational debate with other subjects to arrive at a consensus. Liberated free thoughts. Autonomous. Autonomous means you have the freedom to deal with your own affairs. You must have heard of autonomous colleges, which means that you are free yourself and you can engage in rational debate, logical debate with other subjects to arrive at a consensus. Consensus is an agreement. This conception of the self or subject is fundamental to humanism and underlies, for example, the typical understanding of liberal democracy. You should understand liberal democracy. Democracy is, after all, rights for all, fundamental rights for all, equality. So, this conception is fundamental to humanism and it advocates liberal democracy, free democracy. Liberal humanism. The explosion of the theory or the peak of this theory was in 1970s to 1980s. The term, it is a term, not team. The term liberal humanism refers to the criticism that was current in the 1970s. So it dominated, or it was at its peak in the 1970s and it extended to 1980s. The word liberal means not politically radical and hence evasive on political issues. Evasive means avoiding. Evasive എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ avoiding എന്നാണ് അർത്ഥം. So, it did not give much importance or did not stress or emphasize on political issues, and it was not politically radical also. What is radical? Radical means something of a revolution, some kind of a revolution, a progressive revolution to bring about a change, a social change in the society. So, not politically radical means it did not advocate any social change in the society and it evaded political issues, it avoided, it was evasive on political issues. Everything is political according to liberal humanism, that is social context, power, everything is related to politics, not just purely politics. Everything had politics in it, social context, power, So, power was also politics. Everything is political, everything had its own politics. Women were not represented as there was a phallocentric mindset, which means that it was male dominated theory. Humanism suggests non-Marxist, non-feminist and non-theoretical. We earlier discussed that it did not agree with Marxism or feminism. Liberal humanism was non-theoretical too. What is non-theoretical? It is anti-theoretical. That is, it was opposed to theory and it gave more importance, or it gave more significance. More significant was practical applications. That is, liberal humanism was not something abstract which had no physical existence, like something abstract which existed only in theory. It had practical applications. Let's go through what is close reading and liberal humanism in traditional literary criticism. Close reading is reading the text largely in isolation. It contains everything we need. As I told you, we don't have to consider the context, we have to only consider the text because it is in isolation. Text exists in isolation. It is self-contained and everything we need is within it. It touches on plot, character, setting is a location, and the style is a genre. It focuses on theme, author's exploration of human nature and a moral or didactic message on how we should live. Didactic is something that you teach, a message which is to be taught is given. Liberal humanism, liberal, not politically radical, not committal on political issues. We discussed this earlier, it is not committed on political issues, it is evasive of political commitments. It has no politics. It is evasive. It avoids politics. And it is not politically radical. Politically radical, that is, it does not advocate for any social change through revolution. So, liberal means that it is not politically radical. It is free of those kind of thoughts. It has free thoughts. Humanism means it is non-Marxist, non-feminist, non-theoretical. It does not ally with any of these theories as such. Belief in human nature as a constant which great literature expresses. Liberal humanism, according to liberal humanism, great literature expresses human nature to be constant. As we discussed earlier, human nature does not change. It is just an old wine in a new bottle. It only changes form. The nature is always constant.